What's going on, everyone? Chuck back here with another awesome Blu-ray purchase. This one is a little bit different from previous ones, only in a sense that, well, obviously, it's the stuff that I've picked up. It's also going to be talking about um, these particular series of films, if you will. Um, it's kind of a slight discussion of a genre, but more again along with this particular series. And I know I'm kind of being really vague and whatever. To give some background, as you may have seen from recent videos, a couple weeks back, my son and I went to our local drive-in, the Skyline Drive-In in Shelbyville, Indiana, uh, where they had a two-night the drive-in that dripped blood, where they were showing all Amicus uh, films, British horror films, which were primarily known. They were kind of a, I don't know, um, we would say rival competitor. I don't know if that's really the right terms to British Hammer horror films at the time, but maybe like an alternative is probably the better term. But something they were known for was their anthology films, and that weekend they happened to be showing six of their seven films that were in that cycle, and I really enjoyed these a lot. I frankly had not seen any of those until I saw them at the drive-in. I'd heard about it, a lot of them. I'd read some things on them, but didn't know a whole lot about them. And I'd only seen, well, actually no, I'd seen no, I hadn't seen any of them. There's one of these films that I had seen, and they weren't showing it that night. But like I said, I was rather, I won't say impressed, taken with that, because I've always loved the anthology form of storytelling, because I like short stories, especially with horror, because the horror genre or sci-fi is just made perfect for the short story format, and that's the case with these with the anthology film, as they're just real quick in and out stories. They don't have to have a lot of explanation; they just are, and I find that most enjoyable. You don't need like long, in-depth reasoning as to why these weird things may happen or whatever the case may be. You just know here's a setup, here's the story, the quote unquote punchline, if you will, and then usually these things have a twist, a moral, whatever the case may be. Sometimes they're just weird, and that's just as enjoyable. So one of the things except the short story format plays so well. That's something I really like in I read when I've read Stephen King, I really like his books of short stories, because sometimes those are better than, or I don't say they're better, but again, it's the matter of that short, quick punch. It just gets you. That's a lot of fun. That's why things like the Twilight Zone, the Outer Limits, Tales from the Dark Side, the Tales from the Crypt series, these things work so well, because these kind of short stories, real quick, punch in and out, they work really well. Excuse me. So that being said, like I said, I was so taken with these that I decided I had to have these to my collection. So I went around online looking for what was available out there, and I managed to find them all. Now, funny enough, I already had two of these films, actually three of these films, and so I only had to buy. Well, I had to buy five of them, or four. Hold on, 1, 2, 3, 5 discs. One is a replacement, because I had one on DVD. I replaced it to Blu-ray, and then I had two of them that were like a combo pack together. But so, without further ado, I'm just going to run through these what I got, and give my best recollections. Because like I said, I can't really go too much in detail. I'd only seen these that one time, that weekend, which has now been 2 or 3 weekends ago. I've lost track. And a lot of we watched 6 movies in 2 nights. All those stories kind of blur together. I did take some notes to try to remember which ones were in which film. Now, if I can remember what those stories were, I'm not sure. I will try, but I won't get too crazy. I just want to give it a little bit of some of maybe the highlights that I thought really stood out. The first one up, though, was from 1965, 1965, and that was Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, featuring Peter Cushing. Now, what I love too about these movies is that all but one of them include Peter Cushing, and he really makes these films in one way or another, whether it be, as in this case, the catalyst of the framing device around the stories, or as a character in one of the individual short stories. He is excellent. And another face that shows up a couple times is Christopher Lee. I think 2, maybe 3 times. But Peter Cushing is like the MVP, I think, of all these films. And so this one here, he plays the mentioned Dr. Terror, going under the name of Dr. Schreck, which he says mentioned in German is German for terror. And he's on a train with 5 different people, which one of them being Donald Pleasance and Christopher Lee, and just basically kind of giving tarot readings. And each one has their own little stories. Now, you've got the first story is Werewolf, which is, kind of self-explanatory. Creeping Vine, which is one I thought was an interesting little story about a killer plant. Long before Little Shop, well, maybe not before Little Shop of Horrors, but, it was very interesting. Voodoo. I think that's the one about a guy who was, remember this right, he was a songwriter who goes into a voodoo cult or something, or he steals a voodoo song from a voodoo tribe, I guess, and then it's cursed because he stole it. Again, it's kind of my recollection is kind of vague and explain these. Disembodied Hand was a very effective one, starring Christopher Lee as a art critic who is being tormented by a disembodied hand of someone who's already criticized. And then Vampire, which is Donald Sutherland, who has a wife who may or may not be a vampire. So there, and this, I'm not sure what. Oh, this is Olive Films. This is what this is from, Olive Films, who I don't know a whole lot about. I know they just recently brought out I did see, what was it? Oh my, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like a collector's edition Blu-ray for that from them. So I don't know a whole lot about Olive Films. That's the one thing I do know. There's not much in the way of special features on this. Actually, no, it's pretty, just bare bones. But it's a nice little movie. It was good fun get. So that was the first of this, cycle. Next up is Torture Garden. This one, I don't know, it really stuck out too well for me. But it's basically like the setup is, it's a carnival circus, and you've got Burgess Meredith playing Dr. Diablo. There's a lot of doctors in here. Who's putting on, basically kind of taking to the horror sideshow attraction. Come in and visit these, you have this woman mannequin who's got these shears, and you look into them, and she tells you your future or whatever. Burgess Meredith is great. Let's see, you've got a story, Enoch, about a cat terrorizing a guy. Terror Over Hollywood. Remember, it's about an actress trying to get ahead in Hollywood, and then finding out there's weird shenanigans. Again, I don't want to give a whole lot away. Mr. Steinway, which I don't remember what that one's about, honestly. And The Man Who Collected Poe. That one was interesting to me because it stars Jack Palance and Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing and both these guys are collectors of Edgar Allan Poe. And Jack Palance, who's always known for being kind of putting on those crazy character roles. This one is like, even for Jack Palance, it's like weird, over the top, crazy, as a guy who's obsessed with all things Edgar Allan Poe. And Peter Cushing has like the ultimate Edgar Allan Poe collectible, and Jack Palance must have it. So very fun. This one here is, you see, it looks like it's region B, but it's actually region free. And this is from Indicator Films. I believe that's what it's Indicator. I don't know if it's Indicator Films or not. Indicator. I don't know a whole lot about them either. This is actually only my second Blu-ray from them. The other one being Brian De Palma's Body Double, which is my favorite Brian De Palma film. So this has actually got a lot of good special features on here. I got a lot of glare. I'm sorry. I'm trying to shake that around. I need better lighting. But you've got basically just your disc, and you see the Burgess Meredith as Dr. Diablo with that awesome mustache, and just, yeah. So that was a fun one too. Next up that I had was, and this was the namesake for the 2 nights at the drive-in, 1971's The House That Dripped Blood. And this is actually from Shout Factory, or Scream Factory. Not a collector's edition, just a standard, but it's really cool. They've got audio commentary by author Troy Haworth. I got radio spot, still gallery, trailer, and it says "and more." I got to see what else is on here. And a lot of these too, it says here from the author of Psycho, which is Robert Bloch. A lot of these I know, at least the original stories for a lot of these films were done by Robert Bloch. A lot of the stories in some of these are also taken from, whether Robert Bloch short stories or in later you'll see from the EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. There was another one, I can't remember what it was, but a lot of those short stories from the comics were adapted for these. And this one, the premise of this one is there's a house that, I guess a big Hollywood guy disappeared or was murdered or something like that. The inspector is trying to, figure out what's going on. And he's basically going over the history of the previous owners of this house and all the different stories. You've got Method for Murder, about an author who creates a character who kind of comes to life and terrorizes them. Waxworks, which I want to feel like I should know that. Oh, I think that's the one. I think it's the Peter Cushing one, about a widower who goes to a wax museum and finds a wax statue of a deceased woman he knew, and that terrorized him in some way or another. Sweets to the Sweet, like Christopher Lee, like a scary, child kind of thing. And The Cloak, which is a really kind of fun one. And I feel like a lot of these, some of these can have comedy bits. And The Cloak's based about an actor who's, real well-known actor. He's big in the horror film. He's a big horror actor. He's just so awesome. He wants very big authenticity because he studied all those subjects, of the occult and, whatnot. And he comes across an authentic cloak of Dracula. And when putting it on, it effectively turns him into a vampire. And of course, there are twist consequences. This is actually a pretty nice one. So here's the back cover of that. Again, this is from Scream Factory. This is still available. You just got this here. See what the... Yep, there's your Peter Cushing artwork from the Waxworks segment. Let's see. After that, now this next one is the one that I had seen prior. I actually rented this on VHS, and that is 1972's Tales from the Crypt. Now you see, this is from Scream Factory. Also, it's a double feature, which includes Vault of Horror. Both of these were EC Comics. And these were their adaptations. Now, a lot of you younger people, if you're watching this, you may not even realize there was a Tales from the Crypt movie long before the Tales from the Crypt HBO series, or the Tales from the Crypt films based on the HBO series. But even before this, back in the 50s, there was a Tales from the Crypt comic book that this was inspired by. And on this one, you basically got what was it, like 5 people who are on a tour of some ancient, tomb, hence crypt cemetery, and they get lost, and they come across the crypt keeper, who basically kind of tells them their fates. You've got Joan Collins in the End All Through the Night, which is probably one of the most well-known of this. Even if you're not really familiar, you may have seen this or heard of this. And it's actually misinterpreted too. A lot of people consider it's one where Joan Collins is tormented by the killer Santa Claus on Christmas Eve, and it's not really the case. Because I rewatched it recently, because this is the one that didn't play at the drive-in, and this again is the one I saw, but I came back after that and rewatched this, and I was surprised because I did not realize either that the Santa Claus killer really plays very little into that story. It's more of an afterthought. I mean, the big story is Joan Collins killing her husband for his inheritance, or not inheritance, but his insurance, and trying to cover it up. So the Santa Claus, which is the most remembered, has really nothing to do with it. Reflections of Death is kind of a weird one about it. It's the guy who's running away with his mistress, and they get in a car crash, and then you just kind of see things after the fact from his point of view, and I won't give away the twist from that. Poetic Justice is probably one of the standouts of this, and again, Peter Cushing, as he plays a kindly old man who's being tormented by a rich douche, for lack of a better term, because for whatever reasons. But Peter Cushing puts on such a heartbreaking and sweet performance that and what I understand is, I guess this is like a year after his wife had passed away in real life, and he was still mourning that. And because that's kind of what the character is doing in the story as well, mourning the death of his wife. And he's a lonely old man, very sweet, very kind, and Peter Cushing just is amazing in this role. And you so want him to get his comeuppance for to not get his comeuppance, but the jerk who's tormenting him to get their comeuppance. So you want Peter Cushing to get justice for the torment he's going through, because he's such a sweet, endearing character. And the image of him in this film is also very iconic. But that's just, it's amazing. This was probably the standout story in Tales from the Crypt for me. Next up, Wish You Were Here is kind of a weird take on Monkey's Paw Tale, and it's got some dark humor in it, but it's basically the moral that is, be careful what you wish for and how you wish for it. And the last one is probably one of the most, not terrifying, but maybe nerve-wracking. It's Blind Alley. It's basically, you got a guy who's a ex-military man coming to take over a hospital or home for blind people. I guess. I'm not quite sure, because I'm not really familiar with something like that. And this is like, 1972, England? I don't know. But basically, the guy he's running the place like, the army, and he's not a very compassionate man. He treats the people who live here horribly, and the blind folks in here have had enough, and they extract revenge, which is amazing what they do as blind people and how they extract revenge. I find it fascinating. But they extract revenge with construction, razor blades, and the owner's dog. I'm going to leave it at that. But yes, Tales from the Crypt, very, very enjoyable. Get that glare away. There you go. Highly recommend that one. After that was 1972's Asylum. Now, this is one that I knew about as a child, but didn't really know about the movie itself. I knew the title Asylum because I had this book called The Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film. I still have this book, and it's from the mid '80s. And I think I may have discussed this before, but it's a book I found in a library years and years ago. And then when I was an adult, I found it and bought it again. But as a kid, I first saw this, and the book just blew my mind. That was probably one of the first film reference books I ever had as a kid. But I remember coming across and seeing the listing for Asylum in there. But they put up a poster as an artwork on there, and the poster just blew me away because you had looked like little killer robots, and you know, this image of people wrapped up, just all kinds of little things. It's really crazy. It's like the description of it as a kid, like, oh my god, this seems like a really crazy movie. This is like terrifying. I gotta check this out. Of course, I never saw it until a couple weeks ago. I never find it. I did finally. I remember I bought it on DVD recently. I never got a chance to watch it, but I was so excited to see the drive-in so I could see it on big screen, and it was worth it. And after that, I looked and I got this from Severin because they have this in a nice Blu-ray collector's edition, and you've got, you know, your special features on here. And this is just, the premise of this is you've got a doctor going to an asylum, and I believe he's trying to get a position at the asylum because the previous doctor was, I think, driven insane. But this doctor, to get this job, he has to visit, I think it's like 5 different patients and determine which one of them is a doctor who went insane. And if he can do that, then he can get the job. It's a really weird job interview process. I probably would have questioned it right away if I were this guy, but whatever. So what you've got in here is Frozen Fear is the first one, and it ends with this image here. You got a husband and his mistress conspire to kill his husband's wife, and he basically disembodies her and wraps her up and throws her in a freezer. But all these different body parts come back to life, wrapped up like meat in a butcher shop to torment the guy. My notes fell. You got the Weird Tailor, which that one I don't remember too much about. I don't know, it was about, I think it was a cloak the tailor had made, and had made at a specific time of night because the owner, the person who's buying it, wanted to, I think, use it to bring his dead son back to life or something like that. Lucy Comes to Stay. This one I don't remember too much about, honestly. Full disclosure, that when this was playing, it was the third feature that first night on a Friday. I was a little wore out. I may have been a little fuzzy on the details by about 2 a.m. during a cold, rainy night. So someone that's a little, so I did have to go back and check that out. And then Mannequins of Horror, I know it had to do with, that's like little robots with the mannequin heads, and I think the doctor's trying to put his essence into these robots to bring them to life. Really twisted and weird. And of course, there's a twist at the end. And the Severin here has got reversible artwork also on this Blu-ray, which is basically, it's kind of a simple, plain, nothing too fancy. This is way cooler. And this is still getting readily available in Severin. So after that, we have right back to double feature. This time it's Vault of Horror. And the premise of this one is you have, I think, 5 guys in an elevator that goes down to the lower lobby and opens up to this whole place they didn't know about. And basically it's the Vault of Horror. And they're each, told their story or their futures or whatever. You have Midnight Mass, which is a guy going to a strange country, I think, to confront his sister about an inheritance or a will reading. Again, it's kind of fuzzy on the plot. I have to go back and see it. But, that's got a little twist there. The Neat Job, which is that one is a funny one. You've got a guy who's very prim and very proper. He's, got his whole collection. Everything's the way it should be. It's time to take a wife so she can take care of his things and clean up after him and blah, blah, blah. 1973. By the way, yes, it's 1973. I apologize. And come to find out, she just doesn't do anything the way he likes it. Nothing can be done right, and he's very upset because she just can't get anything right. He can't be perfect the way, he wants, and, hilarity ensues. This Trick Will Kill You, about a couple of magicians who go to, I want to say, India, kind of like that, and basically come across a snake charmer, and trying to discover the secrets behind the flute and the rope kind of thing, and trying to steal that secret. Bargain in Death, I think that's about a guy, if memory serves, who concocted an insurance scam where he's going to fake his own death. That didn't work out too well for him. And then Drawn and Quartered is interesting because it involves, stars a Doctor Who character, and forgive me, I'm not a Doctor Who person, so I couldn't tell you which one it is. I can tell you, I believe it's the one who's known for the scarf. So don't hate on me for that. But he's an artist who has basically realized he's been screwed by people for selling his work, and not getting the proper reparations for it, if you will. So he goes up against voodoo, and there's a lot of occult and voodoo with these things. The British had a weird obsession with that stuff. But he goes and gets a voodoo curse on his hand, so that when he paints something, the painting becomes real, and not becomes real, but it's almost like a picture of Dorian Gray kind of thing, where whatever he paints pictures of his enemies and does certain things to them, and they come true. It's almost like a voodoo doll, but a painting kind of deal. But of course, there's a twist. Let's see, and then that was the Drawn and Quartered one. Okay, yeah. So that's the Vault of Horror, and this is the one that does not feature Peter Cushing, and I think it shows. This is probably one of the weaker ones. I mean, they're all good in their own merit, but I think this is Vault of Horror is probably one of the, and maybe it's because it lacks the presence of Peter Cushing, which is interesting because it's not like Peter Cushing really, he's not in all these films all the way through, with the exception maybe 2, as he's usually just like one part. But his presence it really amazes me how much he elevates these films, even in his little bits that he does. For those of you who only know Peter Cushing as Grandma Tarkin, you're missing out. And I'll admit, I didn't know a whole lot of Peter Cushing, except he's known for the Van Helsing and Dr. Frankenstein bits from the Hammer horror films. I've only seen a couple of those, but these were fantastic. Especially, again, that Tales from the Crypt, Poetic Justice. That is a must-see. And then finally, the last one, this was the last of the Amicus anthology films. And this is a Peter Cushing heavy film as well, which is, I find it interesting because the first one in their series starts with Peter Cushing as the main guy, in the framing story that gives everybody their individual stories, and has the Dr. Terror, and then we finish with 1974's From Beyond the Grave, which, by the way, this is like awesome art. I love this artwork. This is fantastic, and this is from Warner Archive, so it's really cool. And Peter Cushing is basically the owner of an antique shop, and people will come in and try to haggle on him a price about certain things to disastrous results. The lesson learned from Beyond the Grave, when the wizened old man at the antique shop tells you this is a certain amount, pay that price. Don't haggle with him. Don't undercut him. Just pay it. If you don't, bad things will happen to you. It's right here. You have, the Gate Crasher, and I believe this was with David Warner. And this has to do with, he buys a mirror and has a seance, and I can't really remember. Yeah, I want to say he gets a demon to come through. I don't really remember exactly. The mind is fuzzy. I'm going to have to go back and sit back and watch this again, so I do apologize. An Act of Kindness. This one stands out. It's with Donald Pleasance as he's a war veteran, but he's down his luck. He's kind of out, on the streets, kind of, selling gum, stuff like that. He comes across a fellow soldier he recognizes, and who's basically got a bad life. The guy's wife is just nagging him. He's just not happy, so he gets with Donald Pleasance. Donald Pleasance takes him in very kindly to him, introducing him to Donald Pleasance's his daughter, which coincidentally is played by Donald Pleasance's real life daughter, and you can see the resemblance. Those eyes are just, it's uncanny and at times creepy. But they basically, Donald Pleasance and his daughter take this guy in, and they show him kindness with a twist, and that's all I'm going to say. But it's a very, it's done really well. It's really effective. Again, Donald Pleasance's daughter really sells the creepy factor of it. The Elemental is a hilarious one. I really think about it. You have a guy who's has this little spirited elemental. Apparently, it's on his shoulder, tormenting him. But the best part about that, and I do apologize, I can't remember the actress's name. I don't have a note for that. Who plays like this psychic who can see it, and she charges him to help get rid of it. And the story is very funny to me. I thought it was done very well and very comical. And then the door is a lot like the first episode with the Gatecatcher. You got a guy who's buying this door you put in his apartment, and it just opens up to a whole realm with another demonic force or something or other. Again, that was kind of shady. The two standouts for me on this one are the Act of Kindness and the Elemental, for sure. But this, and of course the Peter Cushing wraparound bits, which are great. So yes, highly, at the end on a fairly good note. And again, I can get over, this is fantastic artwork. I mean, you take a closer look at that. If you've never seen this post, this is a great poster art for that. And get my finger out of the way there. So, and that's my trip through the Amicus Anthology films, which again, I had never seen up until I went to the drive-in and saw those, and I just thought they were fantastic. I love them, and I just had to give it. And I'm really glad I got these. That being said, if you do like the Anthology film, and there are several besides the Amicus, obviously you've got Creep Show. There's Tales from Dark Side of the Movie. You can consider Trick or Treat, the Halloween Trick or Treat, not the 80s rock and roll Trick or Treat, but the Halloween one from I can't remember the year, but that's kind of in the Anthology, and there's so many other. But if you're into them, I highly recommend you pick up from Severin Tales of the Uncanny, which is a fantastic documentary. It goes over the history kind of the horror anthology film. Even, from its humble beginnings back in silent films to more modern fare. They talk about some of the TV movies, like it mentions the Trilogy of Terror, which is very famous. And this also has, as a special feature, you've got, what is this? Includes bonus feature films, Eerie Tales and Unusual Tales from 1919. So Eerie Tales, 1919 German film, and then Unusual Tales from 1949. It's a French film. But they're included on here as bonus. So here's the back of that. But this is a great, fun documentary, and it gives you a good history on all things, of the horror anthology. And from Severin Films again. So I highly recommend you pick that up. That's a long one, but I appreciate you sticking around. So yeah, that is it for these, and that was, I've been picking these up since, my nights at the drive-in. I just had to get these, and I'm really glad I did. And I really need to go back, as you can tell, and revisit some of these, because some of them were kind of a blank blur. They all, again, 6 movies, 2 nights, they all kind of blended together. And, it's a good thing I took some kind of notes to remember what I was talking about. So, you know the drill. If you like this, click thumbs up, share, subscribe, leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about, the Amicus anthology films or other films, they've done besides. I know that's what they're most known for, but they have some other films as well. I'm not as familiar with them, but, it's probably something I should check out. Let me know your thoughts. If what's your favorite of these? What's your favorite anthology film? Not necessarily Amicus. Anything. If you've seen Tales of the Uncanny, what do you think of it? Whatever the case may be, or just say hi. I'll take hi too. So that is it for now. So until next time, this is Chuck saying I will see you on the other side.